Welcome to the Out on a Limb podcast. We are all interconnected to a greater web of consciousness. Our aim is to open your mind to a new world through having open-minded discussions about what we perceive our reality to be.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts Samantha and Allison and Will, where we are joined by another special guest, Ann Klossing. We are so excited to have her, and I'll give you a brief bio and then we're going to dive right in because there's lots to talk about with Ann, who is a best-selling author. She's a mentor and a channeler of creator energy. Her journey through depression sparked a deep commitment to healing and helping others to feel their best. Passionate about universal law, skilled thought, and soul agreements, Ann's work harmonizes these concepts to shape and elevate the human experience. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. This is a joy and a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And I got to write a note because skilled thought, I want to get into that because I don't think I've ever heard that term, but we'll get into that later.
Put the piece of paper over the
what did I do?
The candles. And for a minute I thought it was going to go into flames.
Didn't catch fire.
Right.
Ooh, magicians.
Our battery operated candles. But just for our audience,
We like to keep it real.
Right.
Right.
I got connected with Ann through our connection through Ian Morris. We've had him on our podcast previously, and he has a it's called Frequency Minded Magazine. I can put that in the link, but he has a monthly gathering for those that are connected to that magazine and for creators. And it's not just frequency minded creators like musicians or that, but it's creators of all sorts. So healing modalities, art modalities, music modalities, you name it, he wants everybody to be aboard. So just a little plug for his magazine. But that's, Ann was on the last monthly call and I said, hey, I listened to what you were saying. I said, this would be a good podcast because it'll be a good conversation to have. So
yes, and I just got to give a little plug for Hollis Citron from I Am Creative and I Am Creative Publishing. And that book you see behind me is I Love You Because I Love Me Because. So I just, on a whim, she sent me the invite and that was just last week and here I sit. So kudos to everyone who is embracing themselves and really following that inner guidance. And that's challenging.
Yes, it can be.
Yes, it is. And it's interesting because with Ian, he's a musician. So when we hear frequency, we often think music, but everything has vibration. Everything is frequency. And you channel a version of that frequency of the creator being. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. So it isn't just about music when we hear the words frequency. So when Will talks about Frequency Minded Magazine, it's not just about music, but there are some significantly profound musical pieces within there that can be transformative in your life, as well as other pieces, channeling and astrology and human design types of things. So yeah. But one of the things we want to dive into with all of our guests prior to talking about your gifts and what you're doing in terms of your service to humanity is your upbringing. I mean, obviously you're a channeler now, you're connecting with the all to bring forth profoundly divine messages for humanity, but was that always a thing? Like, did you always know you were connected to source? Did you have gifts? Were you raised in a religious household? Like, what did it look like for you growing up?
That would be a heck no. I grew up on a farm. I grew up southwest of Chicago, and out of the 3 farms that I lived on, one is completely subdivided now. One still remains. It's a century farm. And the other one, the main farmstead still exists, but everything else is like wall-to-wall houses right up to it. And I find that sad because I'm so tied to the earth and the ground and rural and just, I love my solitude in nature. So I grew up in that setting. My folks always rented, so we moved several times, but always remained in the same school district. So that was kind of cool. So I had a graduating class of like 152, and I think their graduating classes are like in the 600s now. So that tells you how vastly that has changed. But I was drawn to Southwest Wisconsin to get my degree. So my upbringing, if you want to talk about the religious, I was brought up in a Northern Baptist church. So there is a stark contrast from that God to the God that I know today. So very stark contrast. And I finally asked my dad one day, it's like, how come he would never go to church? Mom would like force him to go. So I do have a picture, and I don't know if it'll be able to, but I find this, she'll shoot me when she sees this. But this is the family picture. That's a church photo. But if you really look at everybody's faces, nobody's happy.
I was about to say, there's so much joy in that picture.
Right.
I would say, Mom, you look like you got a constipated look on your face. Dad looks like he's going to say something sarcastic. And my sister and I just like, we look kind of pissed off. So it's very telling of my upbringing. So I had a really good childhood. Growing up on the farm, Dad spoiled us rotten. Any pet we wanted. We had dogs, we had cats, we'd have young calves. That was our job, was Dad would bring these little runts in that, we're not going to survive out in the wild, or out in the barnyard, but he'd bring them in and put them in a box at the top of our basement stairs, and we'd hang this light down in the incubator. So it was chicks and piglets, and sometimes an occasional calf would be brought in down in the basement. We'd coddle that, and some of them lived and some of them didn't. But the ones that did live, boy, you took a lot of joy in that. So early on, I kind of grasped the concept of death. And I never really have, I feared it at one time. I no longer fear it. It's just, I think that farm atmosphere kind of just, I don't know if it toughens you up. Maybe you get a thicker skin, but you understand that it's the cycle of life. So maybe it's more of an understanding. But I really had a good childhood. So the only negative thing that happened to me very, very young was my maternal grandfather fondled me about the age of that little girl in that picture. Also, my sister, I won't tell her story, and she won't talk about it, but that affected me. How does it not? And my mom came around the corner and caught him. It was just like a glimpse. And I did not have that conversation with her. I'll be 58 this spring. I think I was 45 when I had that conversation with her for the very first time. So from being 3 to 45, all the baggage that you carry with that, thinking that, if I would have ducked, if I would have done this, if I could have done something different, all that chit chat that you have in the mind that really messes with you. So in those phases, I was wondering, gosh, what are you guys going to ask me today? And I was thinking about some of the things that I would address. And I had that feeling. I had that feeling as that young girl laying in bed, not being able to go to sleep because she was afraid, because she'd have recurring nightmares. And they weren't just little teeny tiny scares. They were big scares, like dinosaurs chasing you, dinosaurs eating you, repetitive, scary dreams for a little kid. And it was like, that's the feeling I feel right now. That little girl is afraid to move out. That little girl is so afraid that the big, scary world is going to consume her, that she's so afraid that that's what's holding you back. And I just had that just 30 minutes ago. I had that epiphany. And it's like, I need to write that little girl. So that little girl is going to get a letter, because the more I hold myself back, I can't get to my clients. I know I have clients. I have a ton of clients out there. But playing that girl that would have to talk to Jesus, and then I would feel that solace, and I could relax and I'd go to sleep. So energetically, back then, it was like I had this knowing that he was there, but didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And then, I got into high school, then into college. I thought I was going to be this career driven. I am going to get out there in the corporate world. I'm going to get my degree. I'm going to conquer it. And then I graduated and I got into this government job. And then I realized you aren't conquering nothing.
Oh my God.
It's like I fought that. It's like I wanted to be at the top. but I had no idea what I wanted to be at the top of.
Yeah.
So it's all this stuff that society grooms, in high school. It's like, well, you're going to do this. You're going to go off to college. You're going to do this. So then I started following the path that everybody was telling me to take instead of honoring myself and not having, you talked about the skilled thought, not having the skill or the realization that I don't have to believe these things that I'm telling myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not realize that until the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of baggage. So yeah.
Bringing up so many good nuggets to explore.
But before we dive into those nuggets, I want to, you alluded to it, but then you jumped over it. So you alluded to a conversation you had with your dad, and something tells me it's pivotal to.
It's pivotal to my belief. Dad quit going to church because it scared the daylights out of him. So when he went to church, they had evangelist preachers coming up from wherever, and not the deep South. The deep South and that Baptist community, they're all about hallelujah, having fun, celebrating, praise the Lord. Those people know how to have fun. But the Northern, I call them the teetotalers. If you drink, you're going to go to hell. If you do all these things, I mean, it was like, you're not going to have fun, period. End of discussion. If you even think about doing this, you're going to go to hell. So thankfully, the ministers that we had in our church were quiet. But every now and then you would get that evangelist in that would scare the bejesus out of you. Yeah. And, that's why Dad quit going, is because it was hell and brimstone. You were going to go to hell. He didn't buy into it. So I said, I ain't going.
Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is he knew at some level that there was more than just that damnation that was being preached. He knew there was a greater whole to the connection to God, and we'll even call it the greater spiritual world that is out there. And so if you're indoctrinated into that, hammered into you about the hell and brimstone, it's why would you go?
Yeah. He died Christmas Eve 2010. Wow. And he had a massive heart attack, and we all kind of laughed about it afterwards, because it's like, damn, Dad, you did it good. We had to take care of you. And it really was a blessing, because he was doing what he wanted to do. He was out making his rounds with the truck. He got down. It was snowing that day, very Currier and Ives day, just a beautiful day. And he was out making his rounds, and he got sucked into the ditch. He couldn't get out. And thankfully, he wasn't very far away from we knew there's a campground. And it was George and Angie Pebworth. And thankfully, they were home. And he tried to dig himself out. You could see where he tried to dig himself out. He couldn't do it. So he walked back down the road and back out to George and Angie's. And she just happened to be coming down the stairs and saw him collapse in their driveway. But he was done. There was no bringing him back. But this gets into the metaphysical, but I didn't realize it then. It was in 2010. This kind of gets to some of your questions. I began to unravel. And it wasn't until I was writing my own book, which I have yet to publish, that I discovered his gift upon leaving, upon transitioning. And after his death, I hit rock bottom for the second time, is in major clinical depression. But when I was coming out of that, I did a lot of journaling. And then it was then that I realized that I was communicating with archangels. And it was then I was writing to my dad, and I was getting these answers back. And I put the pieces to the puzzle together as I was writing my chapter for Women Who Shine, as I was writing my own book, that upon his death, it's like you get a look around. So as you transition, it's kind of like the soul to soul gift. Who am I going to help?
Yeah.
I was wearing this energetic cloak of fear. And my Reiki practitioner, my color master teacher, she described my aura was flat. your aura is supposed to be this egg around you, this, this nice oval. Mine was flat to me. And not only flat, but jagged, very jagged. And then I had holes in it. And then I had cloaked myself in this fear. And on my dad's transition, like a magician, taking that tablecloth off the table, you jerk it and everything stays. He jerked that veil of fear off me so I could open my eyes. And after his death, I began to, you talk about Kundalini, whew, talk about the unwinding. It wasn't pretty for me because I resisted it, because I didn't know what it was. I absolutely thought I was going nuts. Bona fide crazy, bonkers.
Wow.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
in your story, though, there's just so many universal themes that we've talked about on this podcast, one of which is these layers of healing. So we've had 70-year-old clients who ask questions, about trauma that they've suffered when they were young, and they have carried it with them for 60 years or more. And it's the same types of universal questions that talk about, your self-worth and affect your worthiness and how you interact with everyone moving forward. But when you go through those healing layers, as you're probably going to describe, it sounds like it isn't a one and done. So a lot of times, like you just said, you revisit that little girl because you can have a great healing and clearing to help you to progress. But sometimes it pops up again and it needs to have another layer of clearing, worked on or something. And so we can't beat ourselves up and say, well, shit, I thought that was done 25 years ago. Why is it popping up again?
But I keep hearing so many people say that, and it's just like, what are you thinking? Like,
Right. It's like a spiral of healing layers.
Yeah.
And the other thing,
I said that less than a couple months ago. It's like, you got to be effing kidding me. It's like, I addressed this.
Again? Wait a minute. What?
And it was. And then I see this picture of my grandfather in a dustpan. It's just like sweeping the dust off, sweeping that residual and cleaning it up and making it gone.
I love that metaphor.
Yeah.
That's great. So the big heavy construction's been done. Now it's just sweeping up the dust.
It's cleanup.
I love that.
And then you can I had phantom fears. So in the phantom fears, I climbed up with my Reiki Master Teacher, who's also skilled in Akashic. And I had gone to her for some of the major Akashic work. And talk about holy man, holy adjustment. It's such a relief, but it's exhausting as well. Because all of a sudden, you've been packing all these weights on your shoulder or wherever you've stored them. And then magically, your soul says, you're ready to get this gone. And the angels and your soul come in and poof, it's gone. And then it's just like, oh, your body has to have time to adjust.
Yeah.
Your mind has to have time to adjust. And it's the mind, in my opinion, it's that personality that fights it because it's clinging to the past. It's clinging on to fear. And it wants to hang on to those old patterns. And that's where, I've been working on my own transformation for 10 years. And I'm still, you're never done. Esther Hicks, when she's channeling Abraham, they tell you, you're never done. And you don't want to be, because that's why you're here, right, to expand and create and be this creator. So what I learned as a Baptist child is nowhere even close to the truth that I live in now.
Right.
Because that was shame and guilt, and you're going to go to hell. And it's like, you pray for forgiveness, and it's like, you pray for how your life wants to be, how you want to be.
Yeah. That's a lot of layers to release from.
Right.
Oh, it is. And it's having the grace with yourself and looking at yourself with grace.
Going through the process, did you ever look at the people around you that you had been in school with, family, friends, whatever, and you just kind of, the pain that you feel for them, because you can hear them saying the same things and just going, yeah, I used to believe that, and poor people that they like.
Yeah, I deal with, immediate family. My mother is very supportive. She may not necessarily understand 100% what my gift is, but I've also kind of kept it to myself with there's just my sister and myself, and my sister's married. And all of Dad's relationships transition. Mom had one sister who transitioned several years ago too. And it's kind of down to that core. But my partner, Lynn, he's just been so phenomenal about it and very supportive of it. Doesn't necessarily understand all of it, but he doesn't hold me back either. So I lost my train of thought again too.
Oh, just about dealing with the different
The family aspect.
Okay.
So
community.
what I find of what I know is I know what needs to be done. I know what they need to do, but it's having the maturity and the wisdom to follow the law of free will and not put your nose in their business. And that is what's kept me out of it, is I stay true to that law as best as I can, because it's not my job to think for them, feel for them, act for them, or speak on their behalf. So it's staying that line. And when that child comes to me and wants to manipulate me, it cannot be done, because I won't allow it in, because I'm sticking to that fundamental universal law. And I love that law. So the three laws that I teach about, to me, are the three fundamental. The law of vibration, everything vibrates. The law of attraction, so what your emotional state of being is and how you're thinking is how you're going to attract and produce your reality. And then also the universal law of realizing that I can be, do, or have anything in this lifetime, which is absolutely wonderful. But there's that Baptist little girl again going, oh, I can't have that. I don't deserve that. And then knowing, on the other hand, that no, it's not my place to stick my nose in here. And I think that I have found to be kind of fun, because it's kept me safe.
Well, what's interesting about that is that when you have, like you said, spiritually matured, you understand that everybody has a contract. And they
Yes.
selected that life, those parents, that situation, that religious construct, or whatever other box they want to put themselves in, for a reason. So it's about being open-hearted and compassionate for what they're going through. It's not to be cold and say, well, you chose that and I'm not going to deal with that. It's about being compassionate to what's happening and ready if they want to come to you for help or advice if they ask you. But yeah, you're right. When we insert ourselves into somebody else trying to save them, where we have this victim, perpetrator, savior triangle, then you're interjecting yourself into their contract. Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
you're stepping into their shoes. You don't really know what their shoes are. You're assuming so much. And, like my mom used to always say, you should just do this. I just want you to be happy. And I'm like, well, if you want to be happy, you wouldn't suggest that. Like, it's like you're not taking into account who I am and where I'm coming from, and I always found that kind of, yeah. I said it gently.
And it is a bit arrogant to assume that we know better, or that our suggestion or our way is better. Which again is not to say that we shouldn't intercede when someone is being harmed, particularly children who can't fend for themselves yet. So obviously when we talk about dark nights of the soul, you've had a couple, sounds like. So given all of that, what would be your advice to our audience, for example, of how to go through those challenges and still come out in an open-hearted way? How do you do that without closing yourself off to love and all of that?
For me, some nights it was absolutely terrifying, because what my soul was showing me during dream time was worse than a horror flick. And I'll give you the for instance of this was I had woke up from a dream, and the dream was my chest had opened up and I had like these two little gremlins coming out, and they were black and tarry and flying away. And I woke up gasping for air. And then in my mind's eye, I could see my uncle who had transitioned. He offered his hand to me and said, looks like you could use some help. And then I sat up in bed and woke up. And I'm like, what was that? And now I know when I have those dreams like that to journal them and to get into that automatic writing zone. What did this represent? So in my case, and I'm talking for me, dreams are dramatic for me and sometimes horrific because I was able to remember it then. Otherwise, I sleep so hard, I don't remember most of my dreams. But if my soul wants to get my attention, it's going to put a wonky dream out there so that I can break it apart. And that's what I do now. And that's what I would recommend. So dreams, like your reality, are a reflection of your emotional state of being. So in that dream, I was terrified. That is when I realized that I had a spirit attachment, and I didn't know, trying to remember if that dream was before I had the knowledge of the attachment or if it was post. I honestly don't remember now. Too much time has gone down. But the attachment was scary enough. And we can get into past lives and all that stuff, but that goes back to, and I don't want to scare people either. The attachment for me was needed so that I understood energy, so that I understood how to discern and set boundaries, and that to realize that if it's not in your mind, it doesn't happen. It's not real. So if you're going through that dark night of the soul and doing some really wonky stuff, be curious about your dreams, be curious about some of the visions or things that are coming into your head. And it's going back and using the principles of universal law. And my recommendations for people to follow are Esther and Jerry Hicks. That book that saved me was Asking It Is Given. And it breaks down the emotions in a scale of 22 emotions. And then the processes of when you've identified where you're at, the things that you can do to help elevate your vibration and pull you out of that lower state of being. The other one that was absolutely instrumental is Loving, my library is right ahead of me. So Loving What Is by Byron Katie.
Yeah.
And Doing the Work. And I still go back to those, both books. And whenever I have a life experience that throws me off course, it's like, okay, it's time to go back to the basics, not try and figure this out on your own. And if you know you're in the dark night of the soul, don't do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Find a trusted person that has either been through it themselves or is trained for that. And I think that's one of the reasons that I went through it. It's because it's like, oh no, don't let your mind get away from you. Because that's what it is. It's the personality grabbing onto those experiences. So we talk about the dustpan and cleaning up the dust, or we talk about phantom fears. So for me, the phantom fears was a past life. So I was a deacon priest, and this was in the UK. And it was still before, I think, motorized vehicles. I rode a horse and I had a dog and I had boys' communities. And the boys, I loved those boys. I wanted to get them on the right track. But in that time, those were dark times when that's what religious did. They fended off the demons. They were, that was the belief in those time frames. And not only did I have the horse that I loved and the dog that I loved and a community that I loved, but I was so adored for what I did. And I was the one who got to fight off the bad demons. So I carried the old, the rounded axes, those great, great big things. And I would go to bed with that. And I would not sleep because I was fending off the evil spirits. So I would not get much sleep. So it's like, oh, well, that makes sense in my childhood days when I was having all the bad dreams. And it also tied through to some of the dreams that I was experiencing going through this dark night of the soul, and that we were able to give ourselves gifts. So he was giving me the gift of courage to do what I'm doing. And then I gave him the gift of sleep by letting him know that nothing was going to get him.
Wow.
Yikes.
So it was a very cool healing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you're going through all of this clearing and healing and processing, and after your dad's death in 2010, and then angels were coming to you, at what point did you understand yourself as a channel? How did that whole thing evolve?
I can thank the Jack Canfield community for that. I knew I could automatic write, but I didn't realize that I would be a channeler. So I worked as a USD employee for over 20 years. I was a soil conservationist. I loved the job, but the more bureaucratic everything became, the less I was out in the field and the less happy I became, and I ended up quitting that. I was into my second marriage at that time. And when I married him, it was the perfect storm. He had narcissistic tendencies, and it was the perfect storm. And I would listen to him. So then I quit the government job, and then I took another job, and then I'd listen to him, and then I quit that job. You know, I was becoming him, not holding a job. And I got to the point where it's like, I can't do this anymore. And helped me put me back on track again. I strayed because I was giving you history.
We're trying to find out the channeling piece, how that came in.
Yes, how the channeling piece came in was after the second divorce, I'd hit that bottom again. And as I was coming out, I ended up staying with my job for a little bit longer. I ended up working for a full service ag center, very demanding job. And I quit that job in 2019. So fall of 19. And I took some time off just to kind of finish the memoir part of the book and just to kind of relax for a little bit. And in 2020, that is when COVID started creeping in. And Jack Canfield had his first virtual event called Reignite Your Life. So it was his first virtual event. And I met.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but for those who don't know Jack Canfield, he's the one that founded the Chicken Soup for the Soul. He had a partner at that time, I think, right?
Yes, his name is escaping me. Mark Victor Hansen.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Yep. And then they ended up selling that. And then he founded the Success Principles and became this global coach. So his first class virtually was Reignite Your Life. And it's where I really got to know a lot of people. It was like, wow, people who think like me. It was new. It was like, you mean people aren't always bitching all the time and complaining? And it was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful community. So out of that, I got an accountability partner, and she was very intuitive herself. And she's like, Annie, channel for me. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, channel for me now. And I'm like, I'd say, I don't work that way. I write it out. And she goes, fine. She goes, we're going to end this call, and you're going to channel for me, and you're going to get back to me. So I did. And so I started through automatic writing. And that's where I was challenged to offer this channel clearing process. She coined the term channel clearing, and it's just stuck. So that's the shingle, is channel clearing. So I'm the channel, and my clients are the clearers. So I want everyone to know that you channel. Everyone channels. So when you're in a spot of no condition and you're doing absolutely what you love doing, and you skip meals because you're so engrossed in it, you're channeling that inner being in you and doing what you absolutely love. That is channeling. I'm practiced at channeling other beings through me, and I've drawn a big line there in the sand. I'm not going to be a Long Island medium to where I am just walking down the street and spirits are coming at me. It's like, no, I don't want that. That's noisy. Right. It's obtrusive. I don't want that. But it has happened. But I've set my boundaries. So I just keep saying yes. So as I'm doing my own work, it was like, consider a Facebook group, consider going live. So I began going live in my Facebook community in 2023. So I go live every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. and it's just me and whoever hops on, and sometimes it's just me and me. But I do know people are watching them. So it's really stepping into that. And I'm trying to figure out where that's going. So I'm trying to figure out where that path is taking me. And I don't want to get really hung up on it.
Yeah, that's the best. So that's, very similar. I think it was 2020 Spirit, because we had just opened this. I had been accumulating some sound instruments. I'm not a musician. I never professed to be one, but music is my key. And they woke me up one morning and said, I want you to get all your instruments and I want you to get on Facebook Live for the next every day for the next 30 days. And just, if there's nobody, that's fine, just do it. Just to get comfortable with that. And then the channeling and all that stuff was in place. And I sit and ask the same question: where is this all leading? What's the kind of the big picture here? But the more I ask that, and then we try to confirm it through personal channelings, they're like, don't worry about the big picture. Everything is just it's moving ahead just as it should. Don't you can imagine what it might be, but it's going to be much different than what you're even imagining. So
Exactly.
Like the pumps being primed or
yeah,
something.
right. So just enjoy the ride, and wherever it takes, it takes.
Well,
So.
what kind of things do you find that you're talking about in your Facebook group?
It's a quiet
Yeah,
group.
'cause there might be people who say, oh, I want to jump in there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I am open to ideas on how to get interaction with it. I've tried polls, I've tried other things, and there's just not a lot of movement in it. But I know they're watching.
I'm gonna give you a secret here. Or no, I'm gonna share a secret. I'm having the same problem. I've got people joining all the time. They get friends refer, and yet it's the same thing. It's like I can get on there and say the most profound things, and I put podcasts in there, and they just kind of
Fizzle.
yeah. And yet
Or they don't seem to get traction like they should.
yeah.
Right.
And yet these people are in the group. And at one point I did a really fiery post just going, if you want to be in this group, speak up, or I'm going to just disband the group because I don't want the numbers. Just, I want people who are interested. That went nowhere.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's like, but you feel compelled to speak. Like it's
truly-
so it's causing you to do something for a reason that we just don't understand.
Spirit's
Right,
moving
right,
you in a certain direction just to do this for a specific reason, and to honor that and continue honoring that until the point at which
Yep.
Spirit says, okay, now we need to move you to the next level.
Yep.
And I think that's where I'm at with it because I'm not disbanding that group, and it's not like I'm not going to not post on Facebook, but I'm gravitating towards LinkedIn and developing a community in LinkedIn. And then when we're doing events, we'll flip back over to Facebook and get the momentum going with it. And just, I've quit trying to figure it out because it's exhausting.
It
Right,
is.
exactly.
It takes too much energy.
Well, and that makes no sense. Here you're this spiritual being, like you're trying to, not trying, this information's come up and you feel compelled to share, and to sit there and go like, oh my gosh, we listen to Will talk about like, and I'll ask him like, well, what do you do on TikTok now? And he'll throw all these stats and figures. And if I get so many views and then this happens, and I'm like, this is not what we're meant to be doing.
Right.
Nor do we, need to have that person who's doing it for us, like an assistant or whatever, because it doesn't
Right.
feel right, does it?
Yeah.
I just completed a visibility challenge. So before the end, it was in November. Wonderful woman, Debbie Prediger. She is tied in with, I think, Dean Gracioso, and she does a mastermind, I think, under Dean, but she's a connector. So we took on this challenge, and she said she had, I think, over 150 applicants. And that was one of the times that I actually knew I was going to be part of the group. I just had this knowing, and sure enough, I was. So we pulled this off, and we created a Facebook group called Be Extraordinary Network. And then within that, we had this visibility challenge, and it was beautiful. We had, I think, over 500 people. So 10 co-creators. So it's like, herding cats. I would not want to have been Debbie to try and, pull that together. And it was it was an experience and it was good. And I think what it's teaching us is that if you develop a community with 6 people, that's kind of the magic number. So out of this community, there's 3 of us that are going to try and pull something together. We have no idea what it looks like. That out of that, organically, you'll grow your business.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, it's kind of dry right now. I've planted the seeds, but man,
Could use a little water.
But I feel like we're in this lull. I feel
Yeah.
like there's this whole, like right now, people are so, there's been this whole shock and awe and over, everyone's just,
Well, everybody kind of
Overwhelmed.
retreated inward, or whether they're spiritual or not, they just kind of close themselves off because there's so much unknown right now, especially within our country, that we don't know which way to turn. So I don't want to put all my eggs over here or over there or over here. So I'm just going to keep them all to myself. My eggs, interestingly enough, right? But
Yeah, we're all conserving our eggs.
we're all conserving our eggs. But yeah, it is. And so when those moments happen, we have to just, trust that the universe is aligning the things that we need specifically. And whether that is clients or whether that is visibility or whether that is just a reasonable time to catch our breath. And a lot of times we're so, many practitioners are so focused on growing the business and growing the things that they miss the times that are for themselves. And they don't recapture that rejuvenating aspect of self by taking a breath. So
I agree. And as we were talking and I was listening, sometimes they come through like neon signs, and there's this trust.
yeah.
Yeah.
Trust.
Yeah.
Trust. And that's what I've heard since November is trust. And I just got the chill.
I want to tell a funny story real quick too before we end up closing. I don't want to forget, but if I recall correctly on your website, the being that you channel, which is God's source, calls itself we. So
Yes.
tell us how that came about, because that's really cute. I like that story.
As I was writing my book, and it was funny, the title for my book is Finding You is Finding God. And when I was just kind of doodling, and I had Finding You and I had Finding God kind of like in a circle. And then I kept flipping them. And then all of a sudden, not very often do I hear the really large voice, but I did that day. Apparently I was doodling a little too long. It was like Finding You it was just is Finding God. So that's the title of the book.
Neat. Yeah.
So it was in one of those doodle phases again. It's like, can I have a name? It was we. I didn't like it. I'm like, really? We? Can I have a name? Like Abraham.
Right. Something specific.
And it's like, no, we. Then I'd drop it for a little bit, and then I'd ask again, can I have a name? We. So we is, for me, it is, if you want a picture of it, I see a globe. And that outer globe is the creator. And up above is the divine masculine, and the other half of the sphere is divine feminine. And then inside that container is 95 ascended masters and the entire angelic realm. The entire angelic realm, trillions of angels. So I can usually tell. So I've gotten more intimate with the angels. The first 3 that helped me were Archangel Michael, Raphael, Jophiel. So shielder, protector, courage, bravery, healer, shine the light on it. Because man, did I need to shine a light on a lot of stuff. So those are the 3 that I began with. But then since then, I've gotten to know like Metatron. I work with him and my clients with sacred geometry and meditative. They're so cool. My angel readings are a triad, and as you learned that, it just gives you a visual to take your meditation so much deeper with your angel and your soul. But the we is these 95 ascended masters. So I've gotten to know the energy difference between an ascended master and also the angels. I get more of a serious, firmer, solid energy with the masters than I do the angels. It's like their energy just it's everywhere. So, and then I also have an Egyptian flair to it. So in my mind, it's the god Osiris and Isis. So, and that makes sense to me because I was a high priestess many, many moons ago under not Isis, but Hathor. So I don't know a lot about that lifetime. And that's kind of the one that I'm working with right now. And I work with a lot of them. But what I found in some of my clients who are into universal law, they're very well adjusted, they understand energetics, is it's so cool that they'll get to a point where it's just like, I just don't feel right. There's something in me that I'm not seeing. Then they'll come to me. And it's really cool because we'll go back to a past life, one that they get to bring forward in these sacred geometries and continue that relationship with. There was something important with that life that needs to be brought through into this lifetime. And it is so delightful. And it makes my heart sing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It is delightful. That's a great word. I love that, when you connect with these beings. So when you connect with those beings on behalf of a client, tell us what that looks like. What are you helping?
So I do with my clients with the channel clearing process, I write a letter to God. I ask one question. What does so and so need for his or her highest good and the good of all? That's the only question. And then it comes in. So many times it's sometimes they'll get right to the point, get right to that past life. Other times it's this picture of how your soul sees you, how the universe sees you. And it's usually something that you needed to see because you don't see yourself that way. Then we'll get into the past life, then into the healing. And sometimes it's not a past life with everyone. Sometimes it's modern day stuff. It's this lifetime that you're dealing with now. It could be a series of things. I look at my own life. You had a miscarriage. You had the first issue when you were 3. So that card. And then I had a miscarriage. My first marriage failed. My dad died. I'm into my second marriage and it's going awry. So I had all these cards that weren't pretty. And it's dealing with that and working your way through it. And I keep losing my train of thought with you guys today. I apologize.
Wacky energy from the beings. And
I think it's because I'm so excited to be here. And it's just like, I want to tell it all.
It's that too.
I understand that. Yeah.
That's
desire
the
to get it
hardest,
all out. Exactly. No, but you're working with your clients through this process, and this is fascinating. So when you do that, are you channeled writing it, or are you?
I'm channeled writing it. So at the end, that's where we were going. At the end of that, then we meet one-on-one, and I take them through that whole thing, and they get the letter. So they don't have to take notes. They don't have to do anything. They can just immerse themselves in the experience. And when we do these energetic healings, especially of its past life, you're journeying back to that point in time. And that's really cool because then I don't ask for details, but a lot of times they'll give me details. And when I'm seeing the same thing that they're telling me, then I know I've got it. Then I know that I got out of the way and I brought through the information. And it's so cool because it takes you, many times you go back to the point of transition. You go back to the point of death, which sounds kind of somber, but it's not. That's the point in time that you carried the gunk forward.
Yeah.
So it's going back and we're going to fix this. We're going to take our energetic spackle and we're going to fix this crack and we're going to heal everybody prior to that and everybody going forward. So it's really, really cool.
Isn't it? It's amazing.
Yeah,
I always
it is,
liked
for sure.
asking, at the moment of death, what was the purpose of this life?
Right.
And that always gives you that big overall profound message that then takes you into this lifetime and you go, okay, I need to get with the program. I need to heal this. I need to go forward. I need to be brave, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
And they only tell me what I need to know to deliver that message. Sometimes I get a name of that past life person, but oftentimes not, especially if they're continuing on. And it's like, that's not my job. That's your job.
Yep.
To go to the heart space, go back there and develop that relationship.
Yeah, and that's with the channeling work that we do. It's very similar. Like a lot of times, the clients will want name like of their guides, or they want a name of a guide, or they want a name of something. And it isn't about the name; it's about the connection. It's about it's really the energy force that you're connecting to at that point. So, but I get it. We're human. We want to contextualize everything into physical something, right?
Yes.
It's difficult, and when people don't quite understand that at that point, it is a growth point for them to get to that point, but they can be frustrated by that, but that's just the nature of it. So
And one of the things I do with my meditations is I do provide the clients with that written form. And we talked about, you started out with music. That is a frequency. Everything vibrates. So it's a frequency, a tone, and your soul doesn't have a name. It has a frequency. It has a tone.
So
And when you use your voice, that is the tone of your soul. So when you go back and you record a meditation in your own voice, you become supreme commander when you merge with your soul. And then you can say, okay, body, you're healing now because we are in control. And that's the name of we, is the interconnectedness of everything.
yeah.
So when I channel, it is the main message has been these three key universal laws. We, not just humanity, but the cosmos, it's everything. We are one vibration. And that when you are coming from a religious background, it doesn't mesh because they didn't teach universal law. They didn't teach, they mention it on occasion that heaven is within, but they mean it. They mean that because it is within you. When you can go so deep into your heart space and the world melts around you, you are connected.
Lovely. What a beautiful sentiment to wrap up this episode. This was fantastic, Anne. We have all of your contact information in the show notes below. So if you are interested in connecting with Anne, please join her on her Facebook group and her website, which is easy to remember, AnneKlossing.com. And check out what she's got available to connect you with your higher self and your soul. And thank you so much for joining us today.
This was a pleasure. And that's my passion, is connecting people to that inner source within them. That is my why.
It is. And having conversations like this is so enriching for us as well as the audience. So
And I can tell you what not to do, and you're going through that Kundalini.
next episode.
There you go.
That's funny. And thanks to all of you guys for watching Out on a Limb podcast. Please hit that thumbs up and share away, hit the notification bell and all of that jazz. And we will see you next time.
See y'all.
Bye.